Alrighty. Hello, hello. Okay, so this episode is going to be a short and sweet episode that I'm really going to walk you through four specific questions with one big one at the end to really understand if your actions are working for you and your best life. So, the reason I bring this up is that, I hear a lot. One of the main things I hear from my clients and from all of you in my community is really how you distract yourself when things get challenging or essentially avoiding your thoughts and feelings completely, aka running away. Or you essentially numb, suppress the thoughts, and essentially wanting to just get rid of your thoughts and feelings. And this is ultimately where all of us start on our journey of just navigating the things in our lives and really understanding what action steps we do want to take in our life and what does that even look like. And so I am really going to break that down today with four questions and an example for you guys. So let's put this into context. So let's say, you want to be productive or you want to be consistent with your routines and follow through on your actions, but then those inner demons come out, like the inner critic, that voice is coming out in those moments. And you end up having these thoughts and, you end up ruminating over them and you go into a spiral, right? And the more you let those inner critics run the show, you eventually end up avoiding or distracting yourself. And a lot of the time, we do this without even realizing. How many times do you just end up being on your phone scrolling way longer than you realize, or binging all those TV shows and really just getting into this headspace where you're on that autopilot, right? You're not even processing or bringing awareness to these things. And so, next thing you know, hours go by. Been scrolling on Instagram, binging that TV show, doing that mindless task to get through those thoughts. And, this is essentially that learned coping mechanism and really brings up that immediate innate response of fight or flight or freeze. And so, I want to go into and chat about committed action. And this is one of the core processes within acceptance and commitment therapy, which is ACT. And that is the main scientific framework I use in my coaching. So, when it comes to committed action, this is something that really focuses on workability. And what does that mean? So, workability is essentially what works to make your life full, rich, and meaningful in the long term. And, this does not mean what works to make you feel good or escape pain in the moment. We aren't here for that instant relief or gratification. Okay. So when I say this, it comes from the heart and from, what I see so often is that this avoidant behavior that we all typically go through when it comes to these thoughts that really dictate our actions. If we have a negative thought or stress or overwhelm, certain thoughts or feelings can then dictate our actions, which essentially lead to results that are not aligned with our values. And so, as I said, when I say this, it comes from the heart because I see it so often, is that this avoidant behavior doesn't happen just once, you guys. That is ultimately the thing. A lot of the time we think oh yeah, this time I'll just scroll, or oh, I don't want to deal with this, so I'll just numb out, or I'll just avoid chatting with my husband and go hang out in the bedroom on my own, right? We think that in the moment, but this is a type of behavior that is a pattern repeated. It's not just a one-time thing. And it basically is something that we can do daily in small ways and big ways. And, that can amplify our stressors. And avoiding essentially just makes it worse, right? And so it is reoccurring daily. So these are things that you need to take action on in the moment rather than processing it afterwards in ways that we don't even realize aren't actually making our lives meaningful in the long term, right? Like we really have to look at this lens and say, if we're creating this moment where we'd rather distract, how is that really supporting us in the long term? And, so looking at workability, I'm going to share with you 4 questions to ask yourself related to if these actions are working for you or away from your values. So, you know, in the spirit of figuring out your patterns and shifting towards your values, these questions help you assess things in your life that you want to change or understand if they are workable and supportive for you going forward. So, the 4 questions are: what have you tried in the past? So, this could be scrolling, drinking, smoking, binging TV shows, suppressing, isolating from others. And the second question is, how has it helped you? And the third question is, what has it cost you in relation to work, health, time, energy, relationships? And the fourth one is, what's that like for you? Like really allowing yourself to reflect on this and how it has impacted you. So I'm going to share my example of good old Brenda. She's my inner critic that loves to pop up when I'm anxious or want to avoid and run away. So let's just put this into context. Let's say there's a situation that happens at work and I get very anxious and I don't know how to respond and I start ruminating over it. And, then I continue to ruminate, haven't taken any action to respond to this anxiety. And then I come home continuing to think about it, dwelling and spiraling. And Brenda is very present, saying all the what if scenarios in my head, like, what if that person thinks differently of me now? Or what if I just ruin that project and so on, right? And to deal with that in that moment, I start to distract myself to avoid addressing the thoughts at all. And, I continue to avoid. So then I'm scrolling on Instagram. I'm disengaging from my husband at that point, and I go into my own world and just numb out essentially, right? Like my personal biggest coping mechanism is avoid and run away at all costs, like just not addressing it. And this is something I've been working on for years. And so this is just, walking through that. And so let's go to question 1. What have you tried? So in this scenario, as I just explained, I distracted myself with Instagram, and then I didn't choose to connect with my husband at all. I avoided him, like I just was in my own world. And so that's essentially what I tried in that moment. And then question 2 is, how has this helped? And, in the moment, those actions may have helped temporarily to make me feel okay, essentially to, avoid feeling pain of addressing this uncomfortable thing. But what I realize is that, it comes back later, and the thought spiral with Brenda, that cycle, like it began again. And so a lot of time I've said this analogy before, I believe, but it's like a beach ball in water, right? Like when we are pushing it down and ignoring it and, just trying to get rid of it, like we're pushing down this beach ball in water. And no matter what you do, like it will splash back up in your face at some point, right? And that only makes it a lot harder and more challenging to deal with. And so the third question here is, what has it cost me? And so when I look at this, I was like, okay, well, since I've disengaged from my husband, that can cause a disconnect in my relationship. And in work, it made me feel less confident, really. And then energy wise, it has affected me by staying in this low energy and not choosing to shift through it and not support my overall well being. And then ultimately, it can also affect my sleep, because if I'm still worrying about it at bedtime and then I can't sleep and I'm tossing and turning. So it's like all these factors. And so that's really the cost of it in this scenario. And then the last question is, question 4, what's that like for you? How has this impacted you? And, like this whole time I've been essentially creating a ton of new ridiculous scenarios as to how my workday will go tomorrow. And, this whole night was dedicated to these stories I created, which ultimately are not true. But I'm spending all of my energy on them rather than addressing them with curiosity. So now you see the pattern here and what areas it has affected me and essentially not supported my values or where I desire to be. And so looking to see if I can process the thought, understand it more and bring acceptance in here to acknowledge its presence without judgment, right? So that's really the key next step. So it's such a valid point to notice and really think here, like, are these current actions helping or hindering me from taking that committed action towards my values? So, my values are connection and openness, but these anxious thoughts are running the show. And then, this is impacting me to go towards those values. And so, the final big overall question here to ask yourself is, if you come to the conclusion that your actions are not working towards your values, then here's the big question: are you open and willing to try something different? Like, really let that question sink in. Are you willing to experiment? See what you could do to support yourself in these moments. And, if you see that these actions are not workable towards the life you desire, you don't feel like they are meaningful or enriching. And so, what is one thing you are willing to try to navigate it? That could be, is it deep breathing? Is it a positive affirmation? Is it moving your body? Is it talking to a friend? Like, you really have so many options to choose from in these moments. You can take one tiny, tiny step to experiment with what could work for you. Because as I always say, like, what works for me may not work for you, and that is okay. You get to decide what avenue you want to go down and see how it works for you. And, like, if it doesn't work, you can always change your mind. Like, we don't need to play into a one track mind or rigid ways of operating. Like, you can have, like, the ability to shift your thoughts and decisions whenever you desire to. If you have thoughts you are dwelling on for hours, but you make the decision to shift out of them and move your body, you just did a friggin' amazing thing for yourself. And honestly, like, and this is the thing, it doesn't matter that you spent hours dwelling. What matters is what you do after that. Like, what actions you choose to focus on and you choose to make when you notice this behavior. Because the thing is, if you're not aware of it, if you're not bringing these thoughts and these feelings and these actions to the forefront of your mind to really understand those patterns, you're not going to change. You're going to stay stuck. So that self-awareness is so key to understand, like, what that next step can be for you. And honestly, if this still feels heavy as you're listening to this and, a lot to navigate and you feel a lot of discomfort with all of this, then you are going to want to hop into my program that starts today called The In Between. We are going to walk through the steps of how to navigate this discomfort, utilize powerful mindset tools, and allow yourself the space to be seen and understood through this process. And the thing is, you are not alone here. So come join us inside. The first call is today at 12:30 Eastern. I cannot wait to support you all in there. And it is going to be so expansive. I'll put the link in the show notes. And as always, Thank you so much for being here. If any of this resonates, send me a DM on Instagram. I love hearing from all of you. And if you're in my Instagram world, keep your eyes peeled for my Black Friday sale. It is my big new project. I am so friggin' amped up to share. If you are in my program, The In Between, this week, you actually get an exclusive sneak peek and discount outside of my Black Friday deal. So, girl, get in my world. Come hang out. And if any of these questions hit home for you, like just send me a message. I love chatting with you guys. All right. I love you so much, and I will see you next week.